Okay, hello. Chapter 7, Dakota Territory. Pa met Ma and the girls at Tracy, and by the weekend they continued west to the railroad, camped near the Basin Oaks River in Dakota Territory. Pa had been there all summer, keeping careful records of the hours the railroad employees worked. He also sold some goods for the store operated by the railroad company. The camp was miles away from the settlement, so the men had to buy what they needed from the company store each day. Pa kept a neat ledger of purchase, and amounts were charged against the men's wages. Looking over Pa's ledger, Laura read some of the purchases of June 1879. One PR overalls, $1. One shirt, 70 cents. One pair of boots, $4.40. One pair of suspenders, 35 cents. One bushel corn, 52 cents. One loaf of bread, 10 cents. One sack of flour, $3.10. 20 pounds of nails, 80 cents. 2 pans, 35 cents. The railroad men slept in a hastily built shanties constructed and operated by the company. For a month's food and shelter, $4.80 was deducted for a man's pay. Pa brought his family to Big Six Railroad camp, but the work of preparing the railroad tracks was nearly complete. The equipment and moved further west. After Pa's ledgers and accounts were checked for August, he moved his family with his construction crews too. Surveyors come to measure and the map of the town of Brookings 7 miles west. The town of Ogle was established. Laura loved being on the wide, empty Dakota prairie. To her, it was friendly, never-ending meadow stretching as far as she could see. The tall and the prairie grass waved in the wind, and white clouds sailed in the blue sky overhead. Cloud shadows moved across the green land. Old Buffalo Pass were etched in the ground in Secure Depression, were scooped into the prairie where the buffalo had grazed. Pa said that there was a place where called Buffalo Wallows, but buffalo were gone, not driven farther west. Willows Gotchi had seen their old grazing grounds before settlers and towns and railroads crowded in. On the trip from the Basin Oaks camp to the one farther west, Laura described the prairie to Mary. It was a long journey by the wagon, nearly 40 miles. The Eagle family passed Widow Sparkling Lakes and wet marshy slopes where rank grass grew as tall as 6 feet high. Prairie cells alternate with long, flat stretches of level land. As the wagon rolled west, Laura felt a deep content. It was the same way Pa felt. The family was alone, but safe, with only the wind and the earth and the sky and calling birds. Pa and Laura knew that sometime they must stop, but as they drove on, all of the prairie seemed to belong to them. When the sun sank, Laura was thrilled with the spectacle and described it to Mary. A ball of puzzling liquid light. It sank in the clouds of crystal and slivered, she said. When the sun was gone, the prairie prairie wind, Quentin and seemed to whisper mysteriously through the waving grass, finally far ahead. A few twinkling lights along through the black night. It was the new railroad camp. The railroad camp was built on the edge of a prairie lake. Some said later that Ma gave the lake in the name will connect the water with the shining moonlight. Glimmering on its surface, Ma called it Silver Lake. The English family moved into a shanty set apart from the bunkhouses, the company store, and the cookhouse. Ma was firm when she told the girls that they must keep themselves a railroad construction crew. Was not Ma's idea of good neighbors, so Pa worked daily with the men in the company store while the girls stayed with Ma in the shanty. Our interest centered at home, where I said there were very few women in the camp. One Irish family was there while the father worked on the railroad. Ma heard that their baby was sick, so she went to help, and her skill cured the child. The family wanted to pay her, but Ma would accept no money. Finally, the baby's father came to thank Ma, again blessing her with the name of every saint be new. He quickly pressed a $5 gold piece into Ma's hand. As the autumn days progressed to railroad construction just north of the Silver Lake camp near completion, the men and their teams and their plows and every earth scrapers worked in a system that leveled uneven prairie, filling the low spots of ground and building embankments where the tracks would be laid. As work ended, the men started leaving camp and heading back to east for the winter. In the spring, of the tracks could be placed, new town established alongside them. Pa heard that the town would be called D. Smith in honor of a Catholic priest from Belgium, Father Père Eugene de Smith. Father de Smith had been a ministry to Six Knox Indians and had been much loved by them. The Indians called him Black Rose. As the winter neared and Pa finished his carting for the railroad, he and Ma talked of returning east until spring, but the railroad superiors asked Pa a favor. He wanted Pa to stay at the abandoned Silver Lake camp over the winter to guard the tools and railroad property being left there. The souvenir offer Pa is salary and the use of the house, which had been headquarters for the serving team, was all well stocked with food and coal on the treeless prairie. Coal was necessary for the winter fuel. The prairie was truly deserted when the railroad camp shut down on December 1st, 1879. The surveyors left the wild birds that had once screeched over the Silver Lake were safe in the south, and 200 construction workers were gone. Word said that we were left with only abandoned shanties and the wind. When the family moved into the Souvenirs house, they were snug for the winter. It was a well-built house in Herbook by the shores of Silver Lake, where I described it. It was large. There was wide kitchen, the dining room, a bedroom for Pa and Ma and Grace, and a pantry and lean-to. Upstairs was an attic. There was a bedroom for Mary, Laura, and Carrie. The lean-to held the cold and the pantry crammed with food. It was all very comfortable and cozy, whereas then, during the short winter days, Ma and the girls knitted, sewed, told stories, and played games. Pa was often away wandering over the empty prairie, hunting, trapping, and looking over the country. In the evenings, after good meals prepared from the pantry's bounty, Pa again played the fiddle before the winter set in. He had bought new books, magazines, and newspapers. These were read by the light of the kerosene lamp that glowed over the red checked tablecloth. Now the English family always read aloud so that Mary could enjoy the stories. When Pa hunted and traveled over the prairie, he walked over an open land searching for a homestead. One day he joyfully brought the news to Ma and the girls that he found a perfect place. 160 acres of fine land had just a mile from the town site. They Smith, it was also close enough to the town for the girls to go to school easily. At Christmas time, a young couple from Iowa came to Silver Lake. Robert and Ellie Rose surprised the Ingalls with their arrival. I think it was the coldest night during the winter, Pa wrote, and someone called out at the door. Upon going to the door, when was my surprise to see a woman on a horseback, but upon looking a second time, I saw a man also. The boots settled into one of the abandoned railroad shanties, and they were jolly company for the rest of the winter. They had come early to establish their home safely in the spring. The boss told Pa that so many people were coming to Dakota when the winter broke that there would be a land rush. Pa had events coming for the land seekers on his hunting trips. He was so rough shanties built on the prairie and their sides of the civilization. One day he came home telling the girls that just 2 miles north of Silver Lake he had supported 2 empty claims shanties, and one old clothes hung on a nail instead of a pocket was an envelope addressed to someone named Almanza Wilder, and the other century the name was Merle Wilder, was written on a big card with a rough plank bunk. In February 1880, not long after Laura's 13th birthday, Pa drove off for the Brookings, where the government land office had established there in the field according to a homestead. He found near Dave Smith. He destroyed many other newcomers for the office. Eagerly found on a quarter section of 160 acres, which is a quarter of a square mile of the free land. Settlers come pay the government $1.25 per acre for a 160-acre tract, or they can cut homestead. Pa told the girls that homesteading was a bet with Uncle Sam to see if the men could not stay on the land for the 5-year requirement. Early in the spring of 1880, land seekers started arriving on Prairie. Because the Souvenirs house was the only one building for miles around, Pa and Ma found themselves, especially in the hotel business again. Strangers who came into the door were hungry and cold. They were glad to pay Ma 25 cents for a meal and another 25 cents to sleep in their blankets on the floor on the ground of the stove. Ma and Laura worked hard feeding the newcomers. They fried salt pork and potatoes, made baked beans, and brewed hot tea, and Ma baked her delicious sourdough biscuits. There was no milk available, so their bread and biscuits were made from dough, using soured water and flour. When a visitor asked Ma for some of her recipes, she found it hard to explain how much of the ingredients she used. Goodness, she said, I never measure anything. The Silvier's house became a hectic and noisy as the hotel in Burr Oak had been, but Laura was happy to see the money mount up from the meals and sleeping places they sold. She knew that it would be expensive to start a new farm on the prairie. In the spring. The English family was surprised and happy to see the Reverend Edward Alden from Walnut Grove among a crowd of men who wanted to spend the night. He was being sent west again to start a new congregational churches along the railroad line. The first church service is in the Smith was held in the Sevier's house. Mr. and Mrs. Boost was the English family's congregation. Ma knew that the history was being made. She wrote down the date of her first service, February 29th, 1880. On the 1st of March, Laura and Carrie walked from the Silver's house to the town site of the Smith nearby. There was very little to see. Carrie came home complaining that all she saw were sticks stuck in the ground. Ma explained that those were stakes to incline lots were houses, stores, and church. And the school would be built. And a school would be pop-up lots along what would become Dave Smith's Main Street. He tore a town abandoned railroad, shanties for lumber, and built 2 store buildings. One of them he sold, and the other he kept in investment. Then a man named Harper also built a store, and Mr. Bartley contributed a hotel. Lumber was hard to obtain in the prairie, and had to haul it from the east by the wagon until the trains started arriving regularly at the new town site. Those were great days for set of the building on Dave Smith in April 1880. 16 buildings were quickly attracted a newspaper called the Kingsbury County News was started. The county was organized, and Paul was called in to help as the first settler of the town site. He was elected Justice of the Peace. It was the Sunday day when the railroad track was finally complete, and trains started regularly arriving to the right from the Smith homestead. Settlers flooded in from the east, among them the Wild brothers and their sister Eliza Jane. From Springfield Valley, Minnesota, the Seviers returned, and the Eagles family then moved into Pa's store on the main street. In those days, Laura observed once people started going west, they usually kept on going, making stops along the way. It did not surprise the English family to meet again in the basement. Some of the old friends they had known in the big woods in Walnut Grove, George and Maggie Masters arrived in the Smith from Walnut Grove, and Ma invited them to stay in the store while they were there. While they were there, that was weird. While they were there, their son was born on the first baby born in December. They spent the sense of excitement of the building town around her. Laura knew that was the end of the old free days of the prairie. Town life was not the English family wanted. They were eager to begin farming again as soon as he could. Pa built a shanty on the homestead, claimed it was a tiny house so small that Ma could only laugh when she saw it. It looked like a half wooden shed that has been split around the rake pole. The shanty was covered with black tar paper when the family moved into their belongings onto the homestead. There was much of the homestead. A well had dug the shelter for the horses and livestock to build. Pa's plow began to cut into the top prairie. So as he worked long days turning the soil, a garden was planted. Although a day's decent was just a mile away, Ward did not go there all summer. She was busy helping Mom and working with Ma in the shanty and all in the garden. All over the Great Prairie, families like in the Ingalls were starting homes. Ward wished, as Pa did, that he could go still farther west, where her journeys were limited to the walks. When married to Low Hill on the homestead, often they went on sunset times when the air was luminous and Mary could feel the light on her face as the sun dropped in the skies and clouds. Were tinted with purple and gold, pink and red were the sky prairie spectacle. You make breakfast when you talk, Laura, Mary would say. Laura was thrilled to witness those western sunsets, but she hoped one day to see what was beyond the Dakota Territory, where the Ingalls family had safely settled on their homestead.